Let's have a chat rather than some PowerPoint presentation on what's a theatrical romantic. I would like to share with you, looking back, um, because I've been verified by David Kibbe as a theatrical romantic. And before that, I spent some time thinking what I was from the petite range of types. And so looking back, wondering whether I could have guessed myself if I was a theatrical romantic or a soft classic or a soft gamine, right? Those are the three on the yin side. Now, this is for a different video because that would bring us too far, but I think some things have gone completely wrong in translation with the yin-yang terminology, because I think it's basically reversed in this Western approach of the body types by these fashion thinkers. That went on from before David Kibbe. He didn't invent it. He built on theories that other women have developed. And yeah, I will dive into the yin and the yang in another video. But let's use the terminology of this Kibbe body types, right? So you have yang, you have yin, and the most yin is the romantic. Then you have the theatrical romantic, and then the soft gamine, I think. Ooh, might be wrong. And then the soft classic, maybe gamine and classic is reversed anyway. Yin in this way is meant feminine, fleshy, petite, and so the most extreme would be the Marilyn Monroe archetype or prototype, where you see a lot of flesh, roundings, right? Curves, that's it, curves. And then the second from that, theatrical romantic, is also very yin, fleshy, but has more yang elements, so sharpness to it. And I knew I was either theatrical romantic or going towards soft classic, which is more balanced. It doesn't have such extreme yin, and it's like the most balanced one can be is a classic, right? There's nothing jumping out that is extreme. Well, so yes, I do think I could have self-diagnosed, and I want to share with you who's maybe wondering what you are in terms of what clothing and textiles and everything works best for you. And let me share that. So one giveaway would have been that I've always been fleshy sounds so weird, but I've always had curves. As a child already, I always had a bum and fleshy arms, even though I had times where I was very thin, but I would still have those curves. And that was actually quite annoying in a way, because that was definitely different from the average primary school age child. And I was doing gymnastics, and I was the only one. Everybody had, say, very thin legs, where, I mean, they're children, so that is what you mostly see. It's unless you're obese, but mostly it's just skin over bones, right? Everybody had like these sticky limbs. And then there was I with already, like the thighs would go up, and then you had the little bum, and then all that. And that was actually annoying, because when we had to do some performance, and then yeah, they had to really measure me and adjust things so that it would actually suit me. And I was not obese or anything. So that is already a giveaway that you are, there's an extreme, let's say, when you're as a child already curvy. So that's one giveaway. Another one is, and I made a separate video about that, about bra size. I don't remember where I read or heard it, but I find that quite a speaking imagery, that the theatrical romantics, the women, or maybe the men as well, have something almost bird-like in their skeleton. Even though there is the curves, the fleshiness that the romantics have as well, the yang in this terminology, the yang, the more angular aspect, the sharpness, shows in bone structure. And I find with the women that I have seen that are verified theatrical romantics, it's a commonality with them, and it shows in a very narrow rib and chest structure, a lot more narrow than different types. And so it means that the measurement of the rib cage is just very thin, and which is a problem for finding bras that fit well. And I've seen that with more theatrical romantics. For example, David Kibbe's wife, Susan, is also a theatrical romantic. And I could really, when we met, we were together in New York, I could really tell how she also, like me, had this really completely under the average sized rib cage. And so her dress would be, and that's so typical for me as well. Like if you have a dress that's not elastic, not fitting, it would just always peek out, be open, because there's not enough volume to fill it. And that is a very clear difference with, say, romantics, because romantics have this typical balanced hourglass figure. You know, if we picture Marilyn Monroe, she had a very defined waist, very like wasp waist, but her chest came just over the hips, whereas with me and theatrical romantics, the chest is kind of narrower and the hips are wider. Maybe this isn't always the case. Anyway, I do not proclaim to be some expert or know-all. I'm just talking about my personal experience as a theatrical romantic and what I've seen. So thin rib cage and difficulty with finding bras that will accommodate that narrow rib cage, and at the same time the fleshiness of the breasts, because that is the typical thing. There are breasts, but there is a super narrow rib cage. That is a bit of a challenge, and but I've worked it out now. I'm in my 40s now, and I sorted it out how to deal with that, but that took a bit of a while. Then what else? Clothes that suit you and don't suit you. The 90s for me were just a bliss, a dream, and I never thought it would become more difficult to find clothes that actually are flattering. Anything that is a little bit elasticated, you know, those typical tops from the 90s, that everything was more form-fitting, and then you had A-shaped skirts or a little bit floaty skirts, that typical year 2000 look as well. I still look for that when I go thrifting, because I know those clothes will suit me very well. Afterwards, in the 2000s or 2010s, I don't know what happened. I mean, it's good for other body types, of course. I'm happy for you, for them. But dressing myself in shapeless clothes, like rectangulars, t-shirts that are not waist defined, I'm completely lost and I look seriously bad. It's like the shine that I would have is just completely gone in clothing like that. So that is obviously a giveaway. For example, a traditional shirt, like a bit more a male version of a shirt, it looks so bad on me. I look 10 years older. I look really weirdly masculine. That's so interesting, right? And that could have been a giveaway that, for example, I'm not a classic, because classics can do shirts pretty well, and I completely not. So that might help you as well. Then another thing is how to know you're not a gamine. In my case, was pretty easy because I know kind of funny elements, very playful. I mean, I can do playful things, but they still need to be delicate. My best friend, she's a gamine, and I remember her wearing outfits with Bart Simpson on it, just as a joke, or really playful. She can pull that off. If I would do that, I look like a complete joke, in not in the good way. So that was very clear that I need to um, accommodate for the femininity in my body type. If I don't do that, something's off. And I don't mean I need to be all frilly and with lots of, I mean, that's your personal interpretation of how you find feminine, but I can play a little bit with the male and female aspects. For example, if I would have something very maybe sexy or feminine as a skirt, I can put a little t-shirt on it, but that still will have to be a t-shirt with an accentuated shoulders and cropped and a kind of a defined waist. But so yeah, that's the whole game, right, of styling. What else? Maybe to finish, personality wise, I've already pointed towards the YouTube channel of The Aligned Lover. I interviewed her. She has some brilliant, I find, really thought-provoking videos about mannerisms of the body types, and the ones from Theatrical Romantic I found, of course, in my case, very interesting. What I feel is that there's a lot going on in these. I might be biased, we all think a lot is going on in ourselves, I suppose, but it seems like a bit of a, and maybe that's why it's called, why David or other people called it theatrical romantic. I mean, there's a lot of yin, and then there's also a lot of yang, like sharpness. I think voices, for instance, of theatrical romantics will be like mine. It's quite low. Susan's voice is low. I don't know what Hedy Lamarr's voice sounded like. I should watch her movies again. Hope they're not silent movies, because then I'll come across a bit silly. But yeah, I think the yang, that just like a lightning breaks up all the yinness, creates kind of like a, I don't know, a bit of fireworks, maybe. I find that it's a balance that's almost not a balance, if that makes any sense. And it makes for, I mean, for I remember being a child as well. Like, I just could have an idea in my head and I was gonna go for it. And like, I remember arriving at my granny's and she opened the door and I said, "I'm gonna paint," and I just stormed under her arm that was still opening the door and to the, and like Hedy Lamarr, she invented Bluetooth. I mean, she was like this beauty and an actress, and then she was also a scientist. And I don't know, I find that there's a lot going on because of the where it's found on the spectrum of yin and yang, if that makes sense. So if you are a personality where kind of you have, on the one hand, a very feminine, receptive personality, but you can be super driven, like more than average. Like, if you're known to be like, oh, yeah, haha. I have people that I see from when I was, say, a teenager, that are surprised that I can actually hold a job, for instance, because they were just like, you were so maybe aloof in a way as well. Like, I don't know, hard to contain. If this rings home, maybe it's helpful. I mean, that does sound pretty different from a more, the classical archetype, right? Where everything is balanced. And of course, we're all having flavors of every characteristic. Luckily, we're more complicated than that. But looking back, I kind of could have guess that I wasn't a classic type in that sense, and maybe you can too. Um, was there something else? Yeah, maybe it's called to be like the archetypical femme fatale. Um, Body type, I don't know if that's really true. I think you can absolutely, I mean, you can be anything, right? Regardless of your body type. It shouldn't be a containing thing. Um, but it might be, I mean, it does speak to the imagination somehow that when you're very feminine and receptive, and at the other hand, you can be like super driven and super brainy. Uh, yeah, the femme fatale might use her looks or charm and wit for her own benefit, right? With if I think about the archetypical femme fatales in film noirs, they were always devising plots to end up as the winner, at the expense of these poor men, completely devastated and yeah. Maybe you're following me, maybe not at all. I don't know, but I think that might be typical for theatrical romantic. I mean, as above, so below, as our looks, so our internal life. What do you think about this? I think there's a lot to be said for that, but it's a vast subject. I just gave you a few of my insights looking back, and maybe there's something helpful for you. And if you have any thoughts or any questions or any other ideas to discuss in the future, I'm all ears. Bye.